Hello. Welcome back to History 101, World Civilization to 1100. This is Professor Judy Gaughan at Colorado State University in Pueblo. We are in Unit 3, Government and the Articulation of Political Power. Today we'll be talking about Greece, specifically about Athens. And I want to make that clear. Greece is not a country. In antiquity, that is. Greece is a shared culture, a shared language, but each of the Greek city-states is independent. So everything you see on this image that is written in dark color and has a little dot next to it is a Greek city-state, and each one is an independent political unit. So when you talk about the Greeks, you want to be very clear when you're talking about the Greeks generally and when you're talking specifically about a particular Greek city-state. There's another thing that I wanted to point out on this slide that's an important way to think about the Greeks, and that is that the Greek city-states are not just in Europe or the islands around the European part of Greece, but the Greek city-states can really be thought of as, at least the center of the Greek city-states, as the land surrounding the Aegean Sea. So everything you see in the modern Greek world, and then also the coast of modern Turkey. These are all Greek city-states as well, even though they are in Turkey. So you want to keep that in mind. The Greek city-states are like city-states or city kingdoms or independent kingdoms that we've seen in other areas. Among the Mayans in northern India, in Sumeria before the arrival of Sargon the Akkadian. The Greek city-states, in other words, are independent political units, and they are very often in competition with each other, fighting each other for power, to some degree for territory, but in many ways for more influence and power. So there's a lot of competition and infighting among the Greek city-states. As is often the case, the competition among folks who have things in common tends to be altered when there's the advent of a common enemy. And of course, you hopefully recognize this slide by now. This is the Achaemenid Persian Empire. And the Achaemenid Persian Empire is going to be the enemy for the Greek city-states. So the Persian Empire is going to appear in our discussions of a lot of different people. The Persians themselves, of course, also in the India. The Persian Empire helped to bring about the advent of the first empire in India, the Mauryan Empire. We're also going to see the impact of Persia in Palestine, and today the impact of Persia in the Greek world. So that last map that I showed you was this territory here around the Aegean Sea in the middle. Our old friend, the author of the Behistun inscription, Darius I, was also involved in conflict with the Greeks. He's the first Persian emperor to fight the Greeks in the on the European soil. The Greeks along the coast of Asia Minor, these city-states on the coast of Asia Minor, had been paying tribute to the Persian Empire and got into some conflicts with the Persian Empire, got a little help with the Athenians, but the Athenians ran off home, and these city-states on the coast remained in the control of the Persian Empire in the beginning of the 5th century BCE. So Darius, in the year 490, sailed his troops from the coast of modern Turkey, we sometimes refer to as Anatolia or Asia Minor, all the way over to Attica, the territory near where Athens is located. And Xerxes landed at Marathon in 490. So you can see the little crossed swords right up here is the plain of Marathon. And in this Battle of Marathon, with basically just the Athenian city-states and a small ally of the Athenian city-state, that should be singular, and a small ally of the Athenians, the Plataeans. We're not going to worry too much about them. These folks defeated Darius's army at the Battle of Marathon in the year 490. If we go back and look at the previous slide, you can see that from the point of view of the Athenians, this was quite an amazing feat. That this, big city-state of Athens from the Greek point of view, but little place compared to the size of the Persian Empire, managed to defeat the Persian army in battle. Now, the Greeks knew there were tactical reasons for this victory, but this victory also affected their ideology about themselves. So the Athenians got something of an ego from this defeat of the Persians. And they also developed some other ideology. The notion that they won because they were free, that is, free citizens of a free state, as opposed to slaves of a monarch, slaves of a king, that is, like as with Darius the First. And this, they also got this notion that they were civilized compared to the barbarian Persian Empire. And one might argue that some of the images on the Parthenon, and certainly people have argued this, some of the images of the Parthenon reflect this battle between civilized in the guise of this human Lapith and barbarian in the guise of this centaur, half human, half beast, is a representation of this ideology of civilization versus barbarians. And by the way, the civilized, that is the Lapiths, the humans, will win this conflict that's illustrated on the Parthenon in Athens. So the Battle of Marathon started the Athenians in particular thinking about this kind of ideology. The next conflict with the Persians takes place with Darius's son, Xerxes the First. The battle that Xerxes wages against the Greeks is, at least for a little while, looking better for Xerxes and the Persians. So Xerxes inherits the throne of the Persian Empire and reestablishes his position there, makes sure that he's secure there, as secure as possible in that vast empire. And then he decides to follow in his father's footsteps and try to extend the territory of the Persian Empire, in part by heading west. And so he also comes to Greece, and we have really serious conflict for the Greeks. Things are looking pretty grim for the Greeks between 481 and 479, the second section of the Persian Wars on European soil. Despite the seriousness of this conflict, however, the Greeks are victorious. This time not just the Athens and the small city-state of Plataea, but in fact, all the Athenians that you see all the Greeks that you see in light blue here joined forces together to fight against the Athenians, to fight against the Persians. So the Greeks were victorious, and in 479, the Persians are forced out of European Greece, and they never come back. Now, a couple things to note about this war. One of the most important battles that took place in 480 was the Battle of Salamis. You see the little crossed swords down here between Attica, this territory near Athens, and the Peloponnese, this large territory where Sparta is located. So the battle was a sea battle. It was the Battle of Salamis. And the Greeks were victorious. And the Greeks were largely victorious because of the Athenian navy. The Athenian navy was far larger than any other, than the navy of any other Greek city-state. this will have an impact on some other consequences of the Greeks' conflict with the Persians. So, let's talk about on sort of more practical level what happens as a result of the Persian conflict. So we have this ideological level of civilized versus barbarian, free versus slaved. We also have the practical level. What happens at the end of the war, that is after 479, the war, in some ways we call it the end of the war because the Persians are no longer in European Greece fighting. However, there's still the city-states along the coast of Asia Minor that are controlled by Persia. And so the Athenians join forces with many of the islanders and try to help continue to take the war over to Asia. And so many of the islands and the cities who can along the coast try to join forces with the Athenians to stand up against Persia. The problem is, though, you got this shared alliance then of these people deciding to fight against Persia. But Athens is ruling this alliance, and ultimately what Athens makes of it is a naval empire. So the Athenians, who used to be just a city-state, although admittedly a very powerful city-state in the Greek world, the Athenians now are the reigning city-state in a league joined by all these folks that you see in yellow here, either as their dependents or on land more as their allies. So there's a slight difference in color. You'll notice the brighter yellow are those people who are part of the Athenian naval empire, and the sort of darker yellow are those people who are allies of the Athenians in their upcoming conflict. So the Athenians start to push people around, start to take more territory. They start to not let allies leave this alliance. And they start to try to push people around on the mainland. Among those who get pushed around is the city-state of Corinth. Corinthos, it says on our map here. Corinth and Athens come into a great deal of conflict. The result of this conflict is basically that Corinth, who's an ally of Sparta, gets the Spartans to declare war against the Athenians, and we have what we call the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War lasts from 431 to 404 BCE. And it is a conflict between the Spartans and their allies on the one hand, and the Athenians and their allies on the other hand. So now we come to the documents that we are reading for class. We are reading two documents. Both of them are actually written by Thucydides. Both of them are part of the Peloponnesian War, the book, The Peloponnesian War, that Thucydides wrote. This is actually pretty exciting for us as historians because this is the first thing that we're looking at in our class that's actually written by a historian. So it's a historian's take on what happened. And one of the common ways to do history, one of the common ways that Thucydides helped to make common was to include speeches. Thucydides says that he's going to write down what people actually said. Thucydides is a contemporary, by the way, of the events he describes. So he's going to write down what people actually said, or what the occasion called for, and what he thinks they should have said. So we're not so sure entirely about the accuracy of Thucydides' speeches. So we have from Thucydides both a speech and a dialogue. The first one is Pericles' funeral oration. So on the link to Pericles' funeral oration, look, the first paragraph is an introduction written by a modern scholar. But after that, that's all Thucydides' words. And you can link to that through the Greece folder on the web links page. And you'll want to print that out and bring it to class. We're actually going to be working with it quite thoroughly in class, so make sure you have a copy with you. And Thucydides writes this at the end of the first year of the Peloponnesian War, so we still don't know how things are going on about that. The other thing I want you to do for class is to look at page 171 in Strayer. Strayer quotes just a very small portion of the speech of Pericles' funeral oration, but I would like you to read the whole thing, which is why I have the link on the web links page in the Greece folder. So, but look at page 171 in Strayer, because the questions that he asks about the funeral oration are good questions for you to think about. The other thing I want you to think about is, how is it that in a democracy, how does the articulation of political power look? Does it look similar to what Darius said? Does it look similar to what Ashoka said? Or is it something entirely new, the way that Pericles talks about Athens? We have a nice combination here of Pericles' funeral oration, where he talks about how things happen within the city of Athens, compared to a dialogue that's a little bit later in history, in 416, 415, between the Athenians and the Melians. Take a look at the slide for a minute. You can see Melos is here. Melos is one of the islands, and Athens wants to force them to be part of the Athenian Empire. So what we get in the speech is an argument between the Athenians on the one hand and the Melians on the other. The Athenian spokesman Alcibiades is quite famous in his day. So the other thing to think about then is, how do we talk about political power on a domestic level? That is, how does Pericles talk about it in his funeral oration? And how do we talk about it in terms of international relations, how the Athenians treat others? Notice contradictions between Pericles' perception of the way folks should be treated and Alcibiades' perception of the way folks should be treated. Okay, so these are the two documents we're working with. They both take place during the Peloponnesian War. They're both written by the historian Thucydides in his book, what we also call the Peloponnesian War. The Peloponnesian War, when it comes to an end, is going to end with the Athenians losing. So the Spartans and their allies will win the Peloponnesian War. But the Peloponnesian War was a big blowout, and it's not just even in the slide I showed you with Europe and Asia Minor, but it goes all the way into Greek city-states in Sicily and beyond. So the whole Greek world is really involved in this conflict. So it's a huge blowout fight. However, when the Peloponnesian War is over, we come back again to the same sort of fighting between and among Greek city-states that was taking place even before the Persian War. This ongoing conflict and fighting with the Persians helps the father of Alexander the Great, who was Philip II. Philip II and Alexander are born in Macedon. Philip II unifies Macedon, then comes down and takes over the Greek world. That's Philip with one L, by the way. Alexander III, aka the Great, decides to come and free the Greeks on the coast of Asia Minor from the Persian Empire. So he comes over and not just frees the Greeks, but he continues all along the way. Okay, all of these places, and in fact defeats Darius III and takes over the Persian Empire and a little bit beyond. And then Alexander will die and his stuff will crumble as well. Okay, so in class, we will look extensively at those primary sources. You want to make sure to bring them with you, read them, think about them in terms of what this unit is about, government and the articulation of political power, and think about them in comparison with those documents we have already read about government and the articulation of political power. I look forward to seeing you in class.